So perfect. Thank you, Shelley. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's Keeping Up with Knowledge translation session, which is being hosted by the MSSU. If you're not familiar with the MSSU, we're one of 11 SPORE support units across Canada. Really rolls off the tongue, SPORE support units. So our role is to support and conduct patient-oriented research, and we work in all 3 maritime provinces with teams based in New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and Prince Edward Island. My name is Rachel Jackman-Tonio. I am the Knowledge Translation Coordinator with the MSSU, and I'll be your host this afternoon. So before we go any further, I want to pause and reflect and offer a land acknowledgement that reflects my location here in Chibouctouc, or Halifax. So I want to acknowledge that I'm in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. This territory is covered by the treaties of peace and friendship, which the Mi'kmaq and Wolastoqiyik people first signed with the British Crown in 1725. The treaties did not deal with the surrender of lands and resources, but in fact recognized Mi'kmaq and Wolastoqiyik title and established rules for what was to be an ongoing relationship between nations. We are all treaty people. So what does that mean for us? Well, for us, it's a commitment to developing authentic and meaningful relationships with Indigenous communities and supporting the inclusion of diverse perspectives in healthcare research across the Maritimes. And as part of that commitment, we also recognize the histories, contributions, and legacies of the African Nova Scotian people who've been here for the last 400 years. And in a lot of ways, moving from those acknowledgements to action, that provides a good place to begin today's session, looking at decolonization and democratization of research, and a really unique model that's been developed around micro-research that looks to empower communities to identify, study, and respond to health challenges. So before we dive in, just a couple notes of housekeeping, which are probably very familiar to people in our webinar-filled world, but please mute your microphone if you're not talking. It helps with the sound quality for everybody. We are recording, and so there will be a video available afterwards. Closed captioning is enabled, but you have to set it up on your own settings. So if you'd like to have the captions, if you look across the bar at the bottom, there's a CC, and you can turn them on there. And there will be an opportunity to discuss at the end. So feel free to type questions in the chat if they come to you throughout the presentations. And if you include your name in the chat, then I can call on you to ask your question. Otherwise, I'll pull questions from the chat and put them to our speakers. So I'll stop sharing now and I'll introduce our first speaker. So our first speaker today is Dr. Noni McDonald. Dr. McDonald is a professor of pediatrics and infectious diseases at Dalhousie University and IWK Health. She is also the co-founder of MicroResearch and has significant experience in research and global health. Together with Dr. Bob Bortolucci, she developed the MicroResearch program starting in 2008 to help build research capacity in developing countries and in Canada, and to help find local solutions for community health problems that fit the local context, culture, and available resources. And we're switching up the format again for today's webinar. So Dr. McDonald will be joined by Melissa Rankin, who'll be talking about her micro-research project here in Nova Scotia. And after the presentation, they'll be joined by their colleagues, Dr. Bob Bortolucci and Kelly Hunter, for a panel-style question and answer session. So without any further ado, I will hand over to Dr. McDonald.
Thank you very much, Rachel. And I hope my screens are up fine for everybody to see. We're actually quite pleased to be here to talk about microresearch and decolonizing and democratizing community-focused research, because we would like some of you to volunteer for some of the efforts that we work on. One of the things that we make very clear to everybody when we go to do this work is that health and well-being are very complex, and healthcare services are but a tiny piece of what actually affects your health and the health outcomes. And therefore, microresearch looks at health in this broad panoply of it, not just in a narrow context. As well, we know that community-focused research addresses research needed in communities. It's about local problems. And we well recognize that local problems need local solutions. You don't need it to be top down, high up. Ottawa cannot tell you what to do in Stanley Bridge, PEI, if they've got a local health problem there. Just not going to happen. The solutions have to be tailored to fit the problems, the context, the culture, and the resources. And it's only locals, both healthcare professionals and others, who can actually do this. They can identify the context-specific problems. They can apply research techniques to find the solutions, and then they can take what their findings are to help impact on the districts or counties' policies or practices with knowledge translation strategies to get the information out to people that they know. So health outcomes in low and middle income countries, Bob and I recognized, as many have, many years ago, that they shoulder the majority of the world's health problems, especially infectious diseases and non-communicable diseases. They have the lowest rankings of health professionals per population, and they have very few health resources, way less than we do in a high-income country, and they have very limited community resources. And what we as a high-income country did, and we did this like most of the other ones, research was often only focused on diagnostics and treatments in infectious disease. This is a building that Canada built at the University of Nairobi that has a level 3 microbiology lab in it. Terrific, important for HIV, but there's a lot of other stuff that money could be spent on that could have maybe helped more. Yes, we focused on clinical training, we focused on better equipment and buildings, but we often neglected, both in low and low middle income countries, any local investigator-driven research. So all the research come from a ways like us, who went to these countries and these communities to do research on them. And there was limited or no local community drive for research. And we would argue the same things happened here in Canada. If you're looking at research in Nunavut or Nunavut, almost all of it has been driven from outside of those communities by academics and other institutions down south like us. So MicroResearch was founded in 2008 to grow local community-focused research capacity, to find solutions to local health problems, and to make global health research more inclusive. It was founded by myself, Bob Bortolucci, and Jerome Kapikienga, who was the Dean of Medicine at Mbarara University of Science and Technology in Southwest Uganda. And literally, it was designed on the corner of a napkin as we were having dinner one evening. So MicroResearch goals, it strives to decolonize and democratize research by placing research skills and opportunities in the hands of the people who live and work in the local community. And it's through their research that the local researchers can help improve the health problems that are very specific to their people and their communities, some of which sometimes apply to many other communities, but they are often also sometimes very context specific. So MicroResearch is built on two assumptions to improve for quality improvement. One is everybody in any role related to health, and remember that big health fan I showed you, has to do their own job and do that work well, but also to improve and recognize the problems they see so that overall we move forward. We aren't just hamsters on a wheel, keeping on ignoring the problem that's tripping us up. And that teams are more effective in problem solving than individuals or groups. And the preference of all MicroResearch teams to have the opportunity for funded research. All right. So that it isn't just one team can compete and they get all the money and all the other teams are cut out. No, 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 no. Everybody should have an opportunity. The opposite of what happens at CIHR or NSERC or the engineering granting agencies. So how does MicroResearch work? Well, it's got a three-part process. The first part is, and I need to say this so clearly, we go where we are invited to go. We never go somewhere where we're not invited. And at that workshop, and the local site helps organize who's going to come to that workshop, multidisciplinary MicroResearch teams are formed. The teams choose their own question. MicroResearch has no input on what that question is going to be. It has to be related to health, but health writ widely. And the team then develops a research proposal overview in 10 days. And then they get their first critical review with the judges at their oral presentation of their proposal overview. And then the judges decide if the proposal overview question and how they're going to do it is worthy of going forward to do a full research, MicroResearch proposal. They then develop their MicroResearch proposal with the help of their coaches, because they have a coach all the way through. And then it goes out for international peer review. So it would be from African stuff, they would come here for peer review of people that review for CIHR and other things. Like, we're not talking, you know, you go out to the community and ask your local waitress what she thinks of this proposal. They're looking for scientific quality. We then take all the reviewers' comments, we summarize them into the strengths of the project, the weaknesses of the project, and then what needs to be fixed to get it over the scientific high bar. And then we send that back. Their local coach and a content expert coach help them fix that. And then they go forward to get local ethics approval. They get their money. It's only $3,000 if you're in Canada, $1,500 if you're outside Canada. And the team obtains ethics approval, go on to do the proposal project as they've designed, gather the data, do a report, and hopefully with our help, we'll get it published. And most of them eventually do that. So MicroResearch internationally between 2008 and 2022, 19 institutions involved, 8 countries, 51 workshops, over 1,200 people trained. But as you'll see, they're not all doctors and nurses. No. We have lab scientists, pharmacists, allied health people, statisticians, social workers, psychologists. And then you note the bar that says others. Well, these were prison people who worked in the prisons in Kenya, for example. They were lawyers, they were IT specialists, they were librarians, there were all kinds of people from the community, including a farmer, including some teachers. 126 projects launched, 51 completed, 49 publications, and some have led to amazing changes for $1,500 projects, like blow your mind. So here's one example that I hope will blow your mind. Isha's team in Uganda asked the questions, why do babies die in the first weeks of life in rural communities? In other words, babies born not in hospitals, but in the traditional practices within villages. And she used her team used the WHO verbal autopsy form. They modified the questions so that some of them were very much more relevant to neonates. I actually took their validated questions back to WHO, and the 2018 version of the verbal autopsy form contains their questions. How's that for impact for almost no money? They did find out they were able to interview 72 mothers in Luwero district who'd lost their baby in the previous year. And there's a whole lot, we could talk more about that, but I won't go into it. 42% of those babies had died from cord-related sepsis. Completely different study from a completely different group in another part of Uganda. Florence's question was, what are the additional birthing practices around pregnancy and birth in Southwest Uganda? And then they looked at them and said, yep, this is good, agrees with what WHO should say, how you manage pregnancy. These ones are irrelevant, or these are not good things to do. One of the things that they noted and published on was that culturally in the Akoli tribe, you put herbs on the umbilical cord, and it was a ritual that was done with it. And when these two heard each other at the forum to present their team's research, they went, oh my goodness, these go together. They then went to the Ministry of Health, presented their research, and the ministry said, this is our own people presenting their own research, not come from a ways. This was good quality research because it was published in a peer-reviewed Western journal. And what do you guys think we need to do about this? And what the team said is you can't change these rituals. So letting the cord dry and fall off, which was recommended, just wasn't going to work. So they recommended to see if they could put something on the cord that would be protective. This was chlorhexidine gel. They went back, Usha went back to the community in Luwero, and they said, yeah, we could accept doing something like that, still do our ritual, but we can put this on. And a new industry was developed that's actually now, it's not for profit, and it's actually selling all over Uganda, as well as in Kenya, as well as in Tanzania. and it's called Umbagel. It's in the mama kits that mothers buy before their baby's born. And then independent of MicroResearch, totally, in 2021, there was a report looking at neonatal deaths in Uganda, and the rates of umbilical cord sepsis has decreased to 7% from 41%. It's saving literally thousands of lives. And all of that research costs less than $5,000. Little can work. So when we started to present about this here in Nova Scotia and said this is what we were doing, the first question we were asked after we'd done our presentations, well, why aren't you doing this in Nova Scotia? We've got community problems too. And the second question was, well, what would it take for you to be able to do that? And that's how we were able to get some funding to be able to move MicroResearch to Nova Scotia, south to north learning, as opposed to north to south learning. So we've done this in Nova Scotia and beyond now. We've had 11 workshops in Nova Scotia, 132 participants. Since 6 projects are up and underway, COVID has had a bit of a slam on us, I have to say. One finished report that has been submitted that's actually changed practice where that was done. We've had 1 workshop in Newfoundland, Labrador, 1 workshop booked for Newfoundland, Labrador already. It's in an Indigenous community that has invited us to come in Flat Bay, and 1 workshop booked for University of Saskatchewan in 2023. The grants in Canada are a big whopping $3,000. And you can see very multidisciplinary. Notice we have police officers taking this, social workers, the other usual things that you might see, and people from the community. Here's some of the questions that came out, local questions demanding local answers. What are the costs associated with the resources utilized by chronically homeless, alcoholic addicted men in HRM? And what is their perspective on existing and potential services? How could they see their life being made better? What do Buckingate First Nations people drink more pop or energy drinks than the general population in Nova Scotia? Why do adolescents at Antigonish identify as their barriers to accessing mental health and addiction services? This project is finished, and this project has actually changed practice out there. This was a 2-sided finding for them. Most of the grade 9, 10, 11 students didn't know enough about where to get services, and that this was confidential. So they've done some things to make that better known, and they have done some things about trying to prove access. In other words, times of when people can be seen. 4th one, what do young people in Halifax area identify as helping them to resist recruitment into the sex trade? I am sure you have now heard stories on CBC about this. When this project started, nobody recognized that Halifax had one of the highest rates of girls disappearing off Nova Scotia, especially off Halifax, between the ages of 12 and 18. And then number 5, what are the commercial fishers, harvesters' experiences accessing mental wellness supports in Newfoundland, Labrador, the one we did there? And again, this was a problem totally unrecognized. There'd been no research done on mental health needs of fishers, even though they have a higher mortality rate per capita than police and firemen do. And there's lots of research on mental health of police and firemen, none on fishers. So, and that brings us to Melissa, who's going to tell you about her community work and MicroResearch. So take it away, Melissa.
Thanks, Noni. Hi, everyone. My name is Melissa Rankin. I have a background in food and nutrition and have a particular interest in community nutrition. For 7 years, I worked at the North Grove, which is a community food center located in Dartmouth North, as food skills coordinator, developing and delivering practical hands-on food skills and cooking programs for children, adults, and seniors. I'm currently the principal investigator of a MicroResearch project called Perceived Barriers and Facilitators to Cooking at Home for Older Adults Living Alone in Dartmouth North, Nova Scotia. I've been asked to speak today about how my work in the community has come to inform this MicroResearch project and hopefully demonstrate to you how MicroResearch encourages research questions from the community. Next slide, please, Noni. So I'd just like to start by providing just a bit of background about, I think you went too far, Noni. I think we just missed a slide. Yes, there we go. To start, I'd like to provide a bit of background about the Dartmouth North community. Dartmouth North is located within the Halifax Regional Municipality, and it roughly covers the area in between the two bridges. It is a vibrant and diverse urban community, but it does face multiple complex challenges. Compared to HRM as a whole, Dartmouth North has a higher percentage of low-income households and income assistance recipients, where 1 in 2 children and 1 in 2 seniors lives on a low income. And this is important because low income is most strongly predictive of food insecurity, and Nova Scotia has a high rate of food insecurity amongst the provinces, excluding the territories. Dartmouth North also has a higher demand for mental health services, a higher rate of adults who are living alone with little to no family support or social supports, and a lower rate of adults that have completed high school. So with these underlying socioeconomic factors, there is a real need in the community for the services that a community food center would provide. Next slide. Great. So what is a community food center? So community food centers are welcoming, dignified spaces located in low-income communities across Canada, and they deliver 3 core categories of programs, which include education engagement, so programs like civic engagement, social justice, advocacy programs, healthy food access, like community meals, affordable produce markets, community gardens, and healthy food skills, which was my area. And this includes programs such as community kitchens, youth cooking programs, and interactive food demonstrations. Community food centers feel that if they can provide quality programs in these areas, they can have a significant and positive impact on the communities that they serve. So, when the food center opened in 2015, my role was to establish and deliver food skills programming for children, adults, and seniors in the community. One of the food skills programs I developed very early on was the Cafe Prep program, which you can see here in action, where most of the community volunteers would come together to put together the cafe menu for the next morning. Many of the participants were older adults and seniors, and it was mainly through this program where I began to observe and hear some of the challenges that older people were facing to preparing and cooking food for themselves at home. Slide. So money and diet related illness were frequently mentioned, but so were other factors that I hadn't really considered before. I never considered before. Some of these issues were mobility issues, not having the stamina to prepare a meal, to clean up afterwards, to grocery shop, arthritis and poor pain management, which made chopping vegetables and other hands-on work very difficult, mental health issues, lack of basic kitchen equipment, inadequate or poorly working appliances, poor kitchen design, etc. And it was also very interesting that many spoke of spending their entire lives cooking for themselves and their families, and wanted to eat well, but money, access, poor health, and lack of support prevented them from doing this, continuing to do this. So I just wanted to share a story about Nancy. Nancy is, you can see Nancy here on the left. Nancy is a community member, a senior who lives on a low income, and became part of our research project, a research team, sorry. She became connected to the food center through taking part in a community kitchen program. A few years back, and after completing a program, we'd like to encourage participants to stay connected to the food center through volunteering. Nancy became a volunteer and immediately picked up 2 volunteer shifts a week, one in the Cafe Prep program and the other in the next day at the cafe. Because the cafe was held on the same day as our affordable market pre-COVID, Nancy was able to conveniently pick up her produce she needed for the week at an affordable price. And many of the harder root vegetables were available pre-chopped, which was great since she had arthritis, and chopping vegetables would be difficult for her to do on her own. So around the time the market reopened, following an extended closure due to COVID, Nancy mentioned how much she missed the market and the volunteering. And this was the first time she had bought these particular vegetables since the pandemic, because the pandemic began, because of the grocery store prices were prohibitively high, and preparing and chopping the vegetables was too difficult and painful. Next slide, Annie. So you can begin to see from this example how community program can reveal pressing issues facing a community. In my experience, it's really easy to become or to feel powerless and discouraged, knowing that so many vulnerable people that you've come to know quite well were struggling to feed themselves well, and many of them living alone with little to no support. So when I heard about the MicroResearch training, it was exactly what I was looking for. I thought that this might provide the opportunity to delve deeper into these issues, connect with like-minded people, and explore ways to bring awareness and to address these important issues, all the while gaining practical research skills and receiving the necessary support, guidance, and structure. So in closing, I would just like to share a bit about where we are with our research. Our project is a qualitative study, and the overall aim is to identify and better understand the barriers and facilitators to cooking at home for seniors living alone in Dartmouth North. We also want to determine what services are available to help with these issues, and to identify any gaps in needs and services. This will be done through talking with seniors in the community and conducting a resource mapping exercise of the community. Currently, we're in the data analysis phase and hope to be finished the study by the end of the year. The goal of the project is to better understand the issues and ultimately to help. There seems to be a growing recognition that research should be a vital part of the development of health policy and practice. On this point, in 2017, the Nova Scotia government introduced an action plan to address Nova Scotia's rapidly aging population, and has a policy direction that deals with seniors and food insecurity, as well as other areas. I think a key component of micro-research is also knowledge translation. Once the project is complete, we will host an event in Dartmouth North, invite the community, along with healthcare professionals, government representatives, and members of the media, to share our research findings and propose innovative solutions for sustainable health improvements for seniors living in Dartmouth North. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. So we just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the other things we're doing in MicroResearch. We have been asked over and over and over, why aren't we doing MicroResearch in schools? Because again, teaching people how to ask questions locally. So we have our very first program in an elementary school in grade 6 class at St. Mary's Elementary School in St. John's, Newfoundland. The teacher and the principal were very approving and very excited that we have parental information and consent from them for their kids to do these projects. The school boards approved it, and we started this past fall. And all 4 teams have done their first, the proposal overview, and now they're going on into the ethics piece. The research questions that grade 6 students, no teacher involvement, no coach involvement. These are their 4 questions, blow you away. Do 10 to 12-year-olds prefer candy over fruits and vegetables? And if so, why? Are grade 6 students self-judgmental? And how does this affect their mental health? And believe it or not, this came from an all-boys team. And 3, how much and what types of littering and garbage is there around St. Mary's School after the snow melts? And what can we do about it? And 4, what were parental experiences when we had virtual schooling due to COVID? The next steps, they're submitting to ethics to MUN, and they're going to carry out their projects, analyze their data, and present their research findings in June this year and consider submitting papers. The next one, as I briefly said, we've been invited the first time this has happened, and we're very excited. The Mi'kmaq community in Flat Bay in Newfoundland has invited us to do a workshop there. We're doing it between May and June 2023. It's organized by the former chief in Flat Bay, who wants to strengthen the research capacity in the community, not to have people keep coming to do research on them, but having their own questions. And we're adapting the MicroResearch curriculum for Indigenous communities with hopes that other Indigenous communities will be invited. And I have to say, the former chief who's bringing us there is so excited because she is involved with many other communities across Newfoundland, Labrador, and she thinks there are other Indigenous communities that very much could benefit from this. There's also MicroResearch that's gone beyond health. They've used the technique in engineering in Africa. It's called the Strengthening Engineering Research. It should be SER, not double E. And they've just started with their first sets of projects. And then the Faculty of Agriculture at Dalhousie has adapted MicroResearch to use in farming. And they've done that in Ethiopia in these 4 regions with, again, questions coming up that would have never come up in the faculties of agriculture in a number of the schools where they've been working in Ethiopia. So MicroResearch is about social accountability, justice, and equity in action. It's about communities being supported, whether they're in Africa or in Canada, to recognize a problem, do the research, and then find a solution that fits the context, the culture, and the resources. It's not about throwing money at a problem. It's about seeing what you can do with what you have. And these are just some quotes. You don't have to be Superman to do research that is important to our communities. Other participant quotes, MicroResearch was eye-opening, and I am positive that will change my life. MicroResearch ignited the dead researcher within me, and I am sure amongst all of us, this is the first time I could think of problems outside my discipline. It feels so great. These will be lifelong skills that will aid our careers. So thank you. These are just a few of the things. Here's some contact information. And then we wanted to finish with what's really important to us, how you could get involved with MicroResearch. This is our sales pitch, folks. We're actively looking to build our volunteer base for both MicroResearch in Canada and MicroResearch international streams. Volunteer roles could include site organizers. We would love to be invited to PEI or be invited to New Brunswick. We've never been invited. We don't go where we're not invited. Help organize the workshop, the logistics, and the recruitment of the participants. Guest teachers, virtual or in person. Guest lecturers assist in teaching the workshop. It goes over 10 days. We do 1 to 2 lectures a day, and then they have the group work. It's based on pre-existing MicroResearch curriculum. You don't have to invent it. You can co-teach with another local lecturer or with a local lecturer, for example, doing virtual teaching in Africa, or you may be the prime lecturer. Coaches, we're always looking for coaches to mentor teams during the workshops here in Canada, or being a content expert coach to help the international teams once they've gone through their scientific approval and getting their project up and going. Reviewers, we're always looking for experts to provide feedback and constructive criticism on all the projects that are coming through that can help those teams strengthen their research proposal. And then you might actually want to be a participant, just like Melissa was, just like Kelly's been. We've had a number of faculty people actually take the workshop and say, it's actually changed their lives too. If you want any more information on the roles, Kelly Hunter, who's our executive director, and that's her email there, would be delighted. And we would all be delighted if we had a slew of people who would sign in and want to participate. And on that, I'm going to stop my screen sharing and open it up for comments and questions.
Thanks, Noni, and Melissa for that presentation. It's fascinating to see how that process of community-based research under this model makes things visible. So talking about those kind of unseen, unrecognized problems that are so known within the community, but not there or top of mind for others. So that's fantastic. And I think we'll have some great discussion. Just before we move into the discussion, a couple of reminders. Now it's the opposite as before. If you want to speak on camera, don't forget to unmute yourself. You can type questions in the chat as we go. I'll pick those up and put them to our speakers, or if you'd like to come on on camera and ask yourself, you're welcome to just drop your name in with them with your question, and I'll call on you. So as I mentioned before the presentations, we're going to have a couple extra people taking questions as well. So joining Dr. McDonald and Melissa are Dr. Bob Bortolucci, who is a professor emeritus of pediatrics, infectious disease at Dalhousie University and IWK Health, where he's an active researcher, teacher, mentor, and co-founder of MicroResearch. So we have mentioned him a couple of times. He's here with us today too, as well as Kelly Hunter. So Kelly has a Master's of Science in Community Health Research, and she's been working with MicroResearch since 2019. She's currently the Executive Director of MicroResearch International and MicroResearch Canada, and her email was up on that volunteer slide earlier. We'll share that out with everyone. So if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. And I see that there's a couple of comments in here already, Noni. So Bryn Robinson, who is at Horizon Health in New Brunswick, so there's a New Brunswick connection for you, was saying that she loved the school piece. How awesome is that? And I think that there's a lot of interest in working with youth and minors. So that's a really interesting project to see. And we had a comment here from Rebecca as well, who's in PEI. And she's a bit busy at the moment, but she might be interested in volunteer opportunities when she's done her thesis. So Rebecca, just to let you know, we'll send an email around, a follow-up email with a link to the recording. And there's also a form that we'll put in their Google form where people can express interest in getting involved. So that will help you connect with the MicroResearch team for when it might work out. And we have a question from Rosamond. She has asked, she said, great presentation. And she was wondering if you're working with anyone in Alberta or if it's just in Nova Scotia. So I'm not sure who from the team wants to start.
I can answer that, Rachel.
Okay.
We're in Newfoundland, Labrador. We're here in Nova Scotia. I'd love to do more in different parts of the Maritimes. And we're starting in Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan had asked us about 3 or 4 years ago, and our problem was it was so far. But you know, we've learned a ton with COVID that we can do stuff virtually that we never thought could be done virtually. And so we're doing our first one in Saskatchewan this year. Alberta, I was asked to do presentations at the University of Alberta about MicroResearch, but again, COVID went on top of us and that kind of slowed us back down again. So love to do work and love to train people up to do this. We think, and this is not rocket science, I don't know if Bob wants to make another comment. It's about taking really understanding how to do community-focused research, distilling it down to its core elements. These are not people that are getting a PhD out of this. They're just trying to answer questions using processes that are validated so they're going to have good quality research findings.
Great, thanks, Noni. I think that virtual versus in person is an interesting component of how these programs develop going forward. We have a question here from Amy Lang. Amy, you've included your name. Did you want to come on camera and introduce yourself maybe?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Wow, what a great presentation and so interesting. So I'm the Executive Director for Patient-Oriented Research at CITAR, responsible for SPORE and also for other kind of strategic work in that area. And I'm really curious to know if you've done any work to follow up on the folks who've participated in MicroResearch training and research activities to see how, you know, are they continuing to be involved in research? And the reason I think about this is that, as you're probably aware, we think a lot about investments in capacity building and how to sustain research capacity over the long term. So I'm really curious to know if you've done any work in that area. Thanks.
I could give you a hug for that one, Amy. I'm a former dean of medicine. Okay, so I'm doing that. We did a study of our international graduates, and we evaluated them 1 to 5 years after they had finished their MicroResearch workshop. So, and we asked them if they were still doing research. What percentage of them do you think were still doing research? This is published, Lancet, over 80%. And I will tell you, as a dean of medicine, I would not, if I'd asked my basic science research grads in, you know, pharmacology, microbiology, blah, 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 over 80% would not have been still involved in research 1 to 5 years after their degree. What I think we've done internationally is we've opened that door on many, many people who wanted to do research, who never had an opportunity. And we know in MicroResearch in Canada, we've had a number of MicroResearch graduates go back to university or go to university or go on to do graduate stuff where they never thought they would ever do that. So I think, again, it's the people who decide to participate, it's because they want to ask questions and answer them. And they get the drive to be able to do it. So thank you, Amy, for asking. We didn't even throw that into the presentation.
Can I just add something to what Noni just said as well? We also, the last few years, have done a couple of qualitative evaluations with a medical student at Dalhousie, looking at not necessarily whether past participants are still doing research, but how their participation in micro-research and learning about community-based research has impacted their lives in a multitude of different ways. Because we had been hearing anecdotally from people like, this changed my life, this made me consider different career paths, this made me look at my community a different way. So one thing we wanted to do was to actually do an actual evaluation and interview people and get a sense from them of how participating in a program like this can change people's lives, separate from how these research projects that come out of the program can change lives. And we got a lot of really great responses from people and how it's changed their perspective and changed the way that they've worked with other people. And we really value that those outcomes as well as the actual research outcomes from this.
Great. Thanks, Kelly. Thanks, Noni, for that. The next comment is it's a really interesting one, and I think I might pull on both our micro-research team and tap you, Melissa, for some thoughts on this. So the comment in question comes from Molly Ryan, and she said, great presentation. I'm wondering if you could speak a bit to any practical advice or share any experiences about how researchers can be humble or better let others take lead in a micro-research context. I know that aspect can be hard even for the most well-intentioned people when they're used to being in a leadership role, especially if they're working with people who are very new to research. And I think that's a fascinating question. And I'd love to hear more about the mentorship model. And I'm wondering who wants to go first. Melissa, do you want to talk a little bit about your experience working directly with researchers and how that worked?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, like I think for me, getting back into that headspace of research, MicroResearch, when it was first brought to my attention about this MicroResearch workshop, it was really, really appealing to me. But and I really appreciated the really in-depth sort of education workshop, the education piece. But I was kind of skeptical, like, how is it all going to work? And even on our research team, we had people who had, when Kelly's on the research team, on our research team, and she has the background, the MicroResearch, or sorry, just the research background. But again, I had very little experience. And so, yeah, like, I guess, like, really wasn't sure, like, how was I going to get, the proposal, get the research ethics, all of that done and put together. And but the coaches were just amazing. They're experts, but they understand that you're not, and they know that you know the issue well, that you're trying to find more information on, and that really goes a long way. And so they're very understanding. They know you have other things going on. But yeah, very encouraging, providing guidance. Like, I can't tell you how much I've learned about myself, about research, about, just about, and the issues that we're talking about, and just even confidence. And this was, I would say, a big, I've gone back to school too, and research is something that I'm very interested in now. So I can't support it enough. I just think it's just an amazing opportunity.
Thanks, Melissa. That's fantastic. Now, I have a feeling that style of mentorship doesn't, as Molly is kind of question alludes to, doesn't necessarily come naturally. So was this kind of part of the design of the program? And I don't know, Bob, if you want to jump in at this point and maybe talk about how you get past that experts used to being experts and experts becoming mentors instead. What are some of the challenges there?
No, thank you. I mean, what Noni was speaking about, the decolonization and democratization. Well, this speaks to the democratization, and Melissa gave sort of an example of her experience on that. It's by design. We're delighted that the outcome that Melissa felt came about, but the design part of it is we thought hard about this before the workshops were set up, and since the very beginning, the very first workshop, the workshop team is brought together on day 2, and on day 2 there is no one is present with that team. Usually the teams are 5 or 6 people. No one is present on that team from the sort of recognized researcher community and the like. It's all participants, and each participant presents their idea about a research idea that they think would benefit health and improve how health is delivered in their community. And then the team, without any coaching, without any oversight on it, the team decides on it. We've given on day 1, we'll give a presentation on just what are the qualities of a good research idea. And they use that as the guideline. So that's one really important factor on it. And we do try to select coaches and let coaches know that what their role is and how they should be acting, and that they should be listening first, not talking, not directing, but trying to give examples through their own experience about how the team might consider to approach it. So it's the team decision on the question, and it's the team decision on just how to proceed based on advice that they can get from within their team and from outside. So those are key things where we've really tried deliberately to enhance the democratization and point out, that each person has a role to play, and each person has an equal say on it and an equal value to the whole team effort. Over to you, Noni, if you want to add something.
The only thing I would add is that we also, I'm going to say this very carefully, we coach the coaches and we coach the teachers. And Bob has a really good analogy he always talks about with MicroResearch. We'll give you a bus, we'll put gas in the bus, but where the bus is going to go and who's on the bus is all related to the team. It's not any of us. If you break down, we'll help you get fixed, okay? But it's where the team is going and what it is they want to work on. And I think at the beginning, we were naive about how powerful this tool is. We're not naive anymore. I mean, it is amazing what people actually know in their community that the rest of us don't know. The question on the sex trade industry and how kids were getting recruited into that, there was a police officer on that team in the community that he was being patrolling. He said it broke his heart because he'd see these kids with the pimps coming along to pull them away, and he couldn't do anything because nobody broken the law until they disappeared. And by then it was too late. So he pushed really hard, and the rest of the team said, whoa, that's an important question. Okay, we've got to fix that. But that question wasn't even on the table. Nobody in any of the academies were talking about that. Nobody in the health system was talking about it. So that's why we need to hear from the community. Same with the mental health question for fishers. Who knew?
Just to add on to that, as I said, on day 2, the teams decide themselves what the question is. And then on day 3, they present what the team question is and what their general approach is going to be. And inevitably, if Noni and I are doing the workshop or whatever, inevitably we're sort of blown away. We would have never thought of that. For the example that Noni gave about the experience in Africa with neonatal death, we would have never asked that question because for instance, the WHO has statistics, but we didn't know that the statistics are based on only what happens in hospitals. And in Uganda, about 60% of the births are done in the local community, usually without an attendant, and there was no data on that. And so we wouldn't have asked that question, and then we would have had zero tools to have it accomplished because we didn't speak the language, the local language, we wouldn't have the trust of the people, et cetera, et cetera. So the question came from them, and only they could do it. And we acknowledge that all the time, that with the fact that us come from a ways have no ability to do the really important questions that they're coming up with.
And that really is the power of the model, as we're seeing in the examples that are building up over time. So a quick follow-up question on the sex worker project, and then a bit of good news for you, Noni. So the follow-up question on the sex worker project is about, Janine was wondering if Stepping Stone, an organization that offers support services involved in that, were they involved in the research related to recruitment into sex work? So that's Stepping Stone. Oh, they were. Okay.
Absolutely. And that's the point of the teams. One of the things that they're taught is about how do you engage? What communities do you need to engage with to do this research? Because it's community-focused research. And Stepping Stone was one of the groups that was that. They went very quickly to Stepping Stones after they'd done all the pieces to get their proposal approved. And they were absolutely critical for the success of that project.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Thanks, Noni. A bit of good news. I know you were saying you were hoping for an invite to PEI or New Brunswick. We have a comment from Jim Jenkins. He's in PEI and interested in seeing some micro research happening there. So we'll make sure you're connected afterwards. And we have another. Oh, sorry. Come on in, Jim.
I should have asked a question there, but I was just going to raise my hand. But two questions, I guess. Number one is, are we affiliated or are you connected to PEI at the moment? Like, have you done anything with the PEI? You haven't.
Nobody's invited us.
That's really good to hear.
Kelly can follow up with you.
Okay, so that's a good one. The next one is, have you done anything with patient partners?
Some of the projects, both internationally and here locally, have had patient partners in them, depending on what the project's been about. Okay, so it depends on what the project is. And I just wanted to throw one other thing in that I didn't put in the presentation. I would say overall for all MicroResearch projects, probably about 60% have been qualitative research, which means often, Jim, it's working with patient partner groups to find out what's going on, all right, in that particular question or area. And then probably about 35% are quantitative studies that are surveys usually that are finding out how often or whatever's happening. And then we've actually had, if you can believe it, for $1,500, we've had 2 randomized control trials.
Well, that's because we have a meeting. I have a meeting coming up at the PEI Sport in the 1st of February. And so that's, and I should actually be talking to Brick or Belle Monroe as well too, because
and you know
this would be perfect. This stuff would be great for us to do.
Yeah, and we would love to work with you. That's why it was great that Rachel asked us to come and be involved. You could follow up with Kelly, or Kelly will follow up with you.
So we're definitely going to put you in touch. We have a couple more questions in the chat that I'm going to try to see if we can squeeze in here. So one is from Janice Sorensen. Janice, I'm not sure if you want to come on and ask your question. I'll give you a second in case you do. Oh, there she is.
Hello, greetings from Port Coquitlam in BC. And I am just so excited by this presentation. I'm a embedded researcher in the health authority within long-term care and assisted living, and seniors in complex care. And that analogy that you gave with the bus we have a partners group of about 9 family care partners, residents, volunteers, and they use that exact analogy. And they're saying, we want to drive the bus in our projects. And so just learning of this approach, I'm like, that's such an exciting way to go about doing research. So thank you for this. Do you have any collaborators or anyone in BC that's using or doing MicroResearch?
We have teachers from BC and we have some reviewers from BC, but we've never done a research workshop in BC. But I think it could be arranged. I think it would be possible to do this. You'd have to follow up with Kelly again, and the group that you're working with, long-term care and complex care in the community, that's exactly the kind of group where MicroResearch has such a good fit, because it's very community focused, the work that you do.
Definitely. And the other idea that comes to mind is an embedded research in the health authority. Like, we have small grants, seed grants for health professionals, but they're done in ways that like competition, and it's a lot of work for them. And I'm just like, why don't we do this where like everybody gets some level of funding, we coach, we mentor, and they get a chance to do the research that they want to do. So just really inspiring presentation. Just wanted to thank you for that.
Yeah. Actually, that was when we were developing the concept of MicroResearch. One of the first things that we did a survey across, this was in Africa, across people, and posed kind of a question like that. If we had $100,000 to spend, do you think we should spend it with 2 projects where there's a great deal of competition and
it's all right. Bob's frozen and I'll finish. 2 projects, $50,000 each. Then we asked them if they would like to have, if they would like to have 3 projects, 25,000. And then how about projects where every team would get funded? And we were stunned, because even the senior people in the faculty said, the majority of everybody said, every team to get funded so that we can get started. All right.
Yeah.
And
I love the idea of the rapid response. Like, you come with your problems and you just get at it.
That's right. And you learn that you can take these tools and keep getting at it for other problems that come up. And one of the biggest things we've learned, and it came out in Kelly's survey that they did, is people have used what they've learned to do other projects for no money. Because you don't have to have money to do research. You can do good stuff, with sweat equity.
Such excellent inspiration. Thank you for this presentation.
Thanks, Noni. So we're running short on time, but there's a couple of things. So there's a question in the chat about the presentation. It will be, we will send it around. Both the recording and the slides will be online. So there'll be an email that we'll send with the evaluation link and all of those details, as well as the form about how to express interest in getting involved. We see some people are inspired. So I'll just get that formality out of the way now before we run out of time. And then there was another question from Amy Lang at CIHR in the chat there. And this one might run a little bit over. If people have to step away from the call, that's fine. But Noni and team, if you have a few minutes to answer it, we'll make this the last one in the morning. Amy asked, can you talk a bit more about translating MicroResearch knowledge into change, and what relationships need to be built? Who else needs to be at the table to help action the results of the research? So really that kind of downstream translation. Right.
So let me answer this double way, Amy. In the very first proposal workshop development piece that they're doing, and they're 85% of people in Africa have had no research training at all, 0. Okay, haven't even been involved in research other than maybe being a research patient. Okay, but haven't done anything. One of the things we teach is knowledge translation. Very briefly, we take the core of what knowledge translation is about and why you have to do it. Why it's not optional. It's no good to do a project and have it sit and collect dust on the shelf. And then when they have finished their project, they can apply. And I want you to hear this loud, Amy. The whole project is $1,500. They can apply for a knowledge translation grant for the project that they finished for $1,000. It tells you how much we want them to understand how important knowledge translation is, that getting change is what this is about. And then there is a knowledge translation workshop specifically that we are developing. The ones that have done this, we've done this hand-holding individual, but we now recognize we need to do this as more training for it. It is a critical element of what we've done, but what we do with knowledge translation is make it super practical. Never mind the theory. Who cares about the theory? When you're on the ground, you need to know how to do this. So it's about identifying the communities that you need to connect with, how you're going to take, what's the message that they need from your research, how are you going to deliver it, who are you going to deliver it to, and we teach all of that. And they have to do a little map of how they're going to do this as part of their proposal overview, and then follow through with it. We've tried, it's like everything we do in this community-focused research, it's about really simplifying and drilling down to the core things that need to be done and not getting highfalutin. I don't know, Bob, if you want to add to that comment. And it's been really, you saw what happened with those two projects that came together on neonatal sepsis and what could be done. That wasn't us deciding what needed to be done. It was them taking what they learned and what could be useful.
Yeah, no, I don't think I have anything to add. We're developing some of our educational packages around KT because we realize that's an important thing. And I think we've gone, the lecture, there's a dedicated lecture to it. We also have on our curriculum website already a KT, a sort of toolkit for how to do KT, that sort of thing. And as Noni's saying, we need to develop a workshop type of a program for KT as well.
Rachel, can I add one more thing while we have Amy? Amy, we've never applied to CIHR to get a grant because every granting agency we've ever applied to says, well, what are the projects going to be about? Well, I have to tell you, we have no clue because that's the power of what we do. And all of these granting agencies, whether they're in the US or in Canada, everybody wants to know what the project's going to be about. And we cannot tell you that because if we did, we'd be driving the bus. And so I would love to encourage CIHR to have a place where we could apply because, you know, it's been really hard to get the $1,500 and the $3,000 monies together for this, but we've managed. Over.
Yeah,
That's
I'll just
plea,
let
Amy.
no, and fair enough. So I'm pretty new in my role, but I will say like Catalyst grants might be the